Okay, welcome everybody. I'm so happy to have you at this inaugural F show. Now, F is for everything. F is for faith, F is for funny, F is for fabulous. Fabulous to see all of you. F is for fantastic. And for today, it being June 16th, which is a very important day in the history of South Africa, because it was on the 16th of June 1976 that young children decided to change the history of South Africa. We thought it would be important for us to launch the F show on the 16th of June. So I'd like to welcome my guests, and as I call you, please feel free, please feel welcome, and just go with it, go with the show, enjoy yourself. So I'm going to invite you, wonderful Courtney, to start with an amazing poem for us. Hi, Courtney.
Hi. I'm Courtney.
Hi.
I'm a spoken word performer from Scotland, and this poem is called "Oh Flower of Scotland," and it's about sort of history of racism from personal experience, but also sort of systematic. Yeah, I'll begin. So this is "Oh Flower of Scotland." "Oh Flower of Scotland, I wish I could sing your praises, revel in legends of ages, hold Gaelic curled in my mother tongue. I wish I could hear her speak, hear her song, soft, sweet, unbroken. But Scotland doesn't love me like her other children, though I was birthed from her womb and have took shelter beneath her breast. She watched me inhale my very first breath. Her smell, her soft tones enveloped me, as if I'd been here for centuries, but questioned is my lineage to her, Scotland, my mother. She shudders if I claim her as such, looks disgusted and wonders how her bastard child grew up so dark and brown and wild. Some seek to banish me from my mother's land. Where are you from? No, but where are you really from? You must like Beyonce and know all of her songs. You're black, aren't you? What are you mixed with? What are you? A Paki? A nigger? Though not chased with knives like my forefathers and their brides, I am questioned. I am ripped and torn apart, never human yet still existing. Violence is so unremitting. In the ether, I am floating, luminiferous but still left choking. Deities rise and fall. But Mother Scotland, do you hear my call while I'm dissected on this table? Cut by those that think they're able, my story told in the tallest of fables. Can I touch your hair? In fact, I'm not even going to ask, I'm just going to touch it anyway. It can happen numerous times in a single day. You'll overstep my boundaries, but then again, you've been doing that for centuries. I step off the bus and a group of boys call me a nigger. And trust me, they knew just how to pull the trigger. Trust me, they did so with vim and vigor. I walk off the bus and not knowing whether to laugh or to cry, I do both. And once again, I'm in the ether, luminiferous. I hear their sniggers, but they're only half right, because I'm half white. And through the night, I recall boyfriends who'd call me caramel princess in front of their friends, display me like a trophy, but never really care to know me as an entity that can laugh and sing and breathe, and then call me black bitch when I don't do as they please. Oh, flower of Scotland, do you hear my pleas? Deities rise and fall. But Mother Scotland, do you hear my call? You were colonized by English men. They took your page and they took your pen. They raped your children and your women, yet you still deny how you joined them to take more lives. And you wear your flower like a crooked disguise. You lost your language, your heritage. And I've lost mine. See, eyes mine well with tears. See, my waters were taken well beyond their years. Just a child, rejected by the motherland, taught to sing Auld Lang Syne and let auld acquaintance be forgot. Be one of a handful of coloured kids in the school, colouring in the sky from white to blue in colouring books taken from shelves that held lies and false history. My tongue trapped beneath a heavy head, lips too large to open, couldn't even say my own name when spoken to. When teacher takes register, I didn't register, communicate. Othered too much, flinch at every touch, it sealed my fate. And when placed in front of another mixed race face, we both feel hatred, the reflection was too great. And still late you are to reply, but I ask, oh flower of Scotland, do you hear my cries? I know it's been a while. Oh, how time flies, and I'm sure you've been busy raining from the skies, but see, my waters were taken well beyond their years. My tears never allowed to stream, my streams never allowed to trickle softly into oceans. My rivers were man-made, they were stolen and taught how to behave. My ancestry is that of slave and master, so please tell me how we move past into new pastures when the rain of truth doesn't fall here. I see her sometimes and then she disappears. Just like me, she speaks politely, descends in mist, then rises again. It's as if we've been doing this dance for centuries, redefining the lines and the boundaries. Luminiferous were in the ether, choking, drowning, quake and quiver. And just like me, her waters were taken well beyond their years. O flower of Scotland, do you hear my fears? Deities rise and fall. But Mother Scotland, do you hear my call? Thank you.
Oh my goodness, thank you, thank you. That is
Painful,
just,
beautiful.
wow.
Thank
Tell us about
Beautiful.
that.
What's that,
Beautiful.
sorry?
Tell us about that, Courtney.
Oh, thank you so much.
Very painful.
Very painful, very deep.
Yeah.
Very deep.
Can you tell us the inspiration? Tell us a little bit about your life.
Yeah, so I was born in Scotland to a Black mother and a white father. And Scotland has as I'm sure you know, a very long history with the slave trade. Scotland was an active participant within the slave trade, and we have a very long history of racism, of white supremacy that many people here just do not want to acknowledge. And so the kinds of racism you experience in Scotland as a Black person or a person of colour is very much sort of individual acts of prejudice, but also, you know, systematic issues as well, you know, police brutality, you know, sort of state-sanctioned violence. So, I mean, it's a really big issue here in Scotland, issues of racial injustice.
We're going to talk a little bit more about Black Lives Matter when we come to Kim. So I'm going to move to Candace at this point. Candace, it being June 16th, and I know that you've been very busy as a young activist in South Africa, but tell us, would you like to start with the excerpt from the book that you've written, and then we can go into your story?
Okay, brilliant. But first, just before I start, I just have to give Courtney another, because that was so powerful. So
thank you so much
for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you
so
for listening.
I'm just going to read a very short excerpt, and then I'm going to speak a little bit about my story. So this is from my book, Forgiveness Redefined, and it's from the chapter called The Book. I threw it on the bed and jumped off the velvet stool, afraid of being caught. I stood at the edge of the bed, familiar with the one man on the cover of the book, since my mom had told me just enough to know that he had killed my father. Excited and a little nervous, I fully opened the book. I knew inside there would be a picture of my father, Glenn Masilo. I'd seen very few pictures of him, and I was curious as to why this was the one everyone wanted to see. I recalled the page number and leafed through the book to get to it. I noticed there were a lot of pictures in there too. Finally, I got to the page that I'd wanted to see for as long as we had owned the book. I was met by something that felt like a kick in the gut, and almost as though it was punishment for doing something I knew I wasn't supposed to. The image that met my 9-year-old eyes was that of a corpse, a charred, skeletal figure clutching a steering wheel, with bones exposed, eyes protruding, and skin melted as though made of wax. The picture would be seared into my mind for years to come and manifest itself in anger, resentment, and pain. So that was a short excerpt from the fuller story of my life, which is that my father was killed when I was 9 months old by an apartheid assassin by the name of Eugene de Kock. And so at 9, that's what happened to me. My mom had bought a book, and I knew that my father was in this book. And when I opened it, that's the image I got seared into my mind. And as I grew older, I started becoming incredibly resentful, depressed, angry. And I think it was around 16 when I went to the doctor and they said, you know, I think you're having a heart attack. And the doctor said, but it's not a heart attack. Your body is just slowly deteriorating. And I've never seen stress symptoms so severe in someone so young. And so when I left the doctor's office, I knew that my body was killing me. But to be honest, I was pretty much okay with it. And it only hit me when I was around 18, when I thought to myself, okay, if I'm going to die, I've never loved, I've never experienced joy, I've never experienced happiness. And it was for the first time in my life that I realized how much control my father's killer had on my life. And that was when I decided to embark on the path of forgiving him. And so as I started this journey, when I was 23, I was presented with an opportunity I could have never expected. I was asked if I'd like to meet him in prison. So we went with my family to go and see this man in prison. And we spoke, and he told us, you know, that he had ambushed my father. My father was seen as a problem in the movement. And so they had actually set up targeted attacks on him. And so he was just supposed to be watching over this attack that it went off smoothly. And when he saw that my father had actually escaped most of the shooting, he ran down the Nelspruit Bridge himself. He emptied out his magazine cartridge on my father. Then when he still saw signs of life in the car, he doused them all in fuel and he set them alight. And so after sharing the story with us, it was the first time we'd heard it as a family. And so I said to him, when it got to my turn, I said, you know, Eugene, I want to say I forgive you. But before I do, I want to know one thing. Do you forgive yourself? And he looked away and he dabbed the side of his eye and he looked back at me and he said, every time a family comes here, that's one thing I hope they never ask me. And he said, when you've done the things I've done, how do you forgive yourself? And I broke down. I just started sobbing. And I realized in that moment, I wasn't sobbing for myself or who I had lost. I was sobbing for both of us, looking at each other in so much pain and knowing that although I was a victim to his crime, that he would never find peace. And so it really began my emotion into this world of forgiveness and teaching people how to release anger and trauma. Because I think for me, what I realized was when we're living in a state of pain, we don't realize it. It's like living with rose-colored glasses. You go around the world, you think everything is fine. It's when you take them off that you realize that, whoa, is this how I'm supposed to feel? Is this what life is supposed to look like? And no one human being should have that much control over your life. You deserve that power. You deserve that control. So yes, that's my story in a nutshell.
Thank you. Candace, do you have a copy of the book that we can just see the cover?
Unfortunately, I don't have it here with me for those of you.
So we do want to get a copy of the book, and I promised to buy a few because I need to give them away. I think it's so important. And I really want to thank you. I met Candace at the Nelson Mandela Foundation when a few of these young writers were together. Well, they weren't all young, but I said to her, of all the writers, she was the one person I honed into. I think the idea of forgiveness redefined is the title. And I said that because, so just as an aside, I was detained as a student activist in 1980. So I went to prison and, you know, so there was this connection immediately with you. But I think just the honesty of your story and the brutalness, the brutality, the realness of it, and that you said, which was so important, was that you needed to forgive him so that you could move forward. I think for all of us to consider that, and each of us as we sit here have our stories, I think, of whatever pain, and you carry that because of this other person or this other thing, and you realize I needed to let go of that. I was also fascinated that you are still very young, but you were 9 years old, and that 9-year-old child had to witness something like that. And so I was totally attracted to you and your passion and your story. And I thank you so much for joining us today. We do need to get a copy of that book. Is it on Amazon? Where else? I know in South Africa we could get it at Exclusive Books.
Absolutely. And if you go on my website, www.candicemama.com, then you can either purchase the ebook, which is on Amazon, or you can purchase a copy and we ship around the world.
Okay, thank you, Candice. So Justine, we're going to show the little Wazi clip right now, and then we'll go into Wiam. Wiam's going to talk to us about the effects of COVID in terms of young children having to go back to school. Wiam is a documentary filmmaker, but her concern right now is as a mother. So we're going to watch the Wazi documentary. These are little animations we produced for children. And this is the one about why children need to stay at home. Our concern has always been, you can start it as soon as it's ready, Justine. I'll just speak over it until it actually starts showing. There we go. Lovely. Do you have sound?
Hear it.
Yeah, there we got it. What sound? Thank you. Well done.
Hello, friends. It's Wazi here. Do you know why we need to stay at home right now? There's a new virus in town that's making everyone sick. It can make you a little bit sick or very sick. To make sure less people get the virus, we all need to stay at home. If we all stay in our homes, then the virus can't spread. So stay home and stay safe. See you later.
So I know that when we started this, we were saying to the kids why they needed to stay at home. But we know now in South Africa, we're actually getting ready for young people, for children to go back to school. And this was something that concerned you. Please tell us how you feel right now.
Maybe I could just talk a little bit about my work before I go straight into that.
Sure.
My work started out actually as a children's rights activist at an organization called Molo Songololo in my late teens, where I started my career in media. And I think since that time in my life, I've had an acute awareness of children's rights. And now I'm looking at the current legislation with regards to COVID-19 and children returning to school. And I'm asking myself, are children being protected and are their rights being violated? And by children, I mean all persons under the age of 18. So you know, the Bill of Rights and the Children's Charter says that children have the right to a safe and secure environment. If we're putting our children into school, are we putting them into a safe and secure environment? Now, there's a whole lot of medical research which points to the fact that children are not as affected by COVID-19, but there are other schools which say that they are, and that there have been cases of children who have been detrimentally affected by COVID-19. So I believe that the long-term research doesn't exist, because what's going to happen to our children if they're in school for 6 hours a day wearing a mask where they're deprived of oxygen? Are we going to find out 3-4 years down the line that many children suffer from severe lung damage or anything else detrimental to their health? The research doesn't exist yet. So I feel like you know, it's a gray area. There is no concrete research with regards to children's health at this particular stage. I know that it's going to be detrimental to their mental health, that's for sure. I know from my own children that it's impossible for them to social distance. You know, they've had interactions with like my siblings' children, like first cousins, and when they see each other, you can't tell them to social distance. It's impossible, right? So I can't see my children going back to school and social distancing. My daughter's at high school, and her school is closed down because one of the teachers contracted COVID. So also we are asking teachers to put themselves on the front line, yeah? I believe that as a generation of adults, we actually need to stand up for the rights of children. And I mean, all those people under the age of 18, and actually say that, listen, I'm not okay with sending my child to school. And I mean, my children are fortunate because they have me as their mother, but there may be many other parents out there who will send their children to school, you know, and I urge them to rethink this, because firstly, you're not putting your child in a safe environment, despite all of the measures that are being taken. Secondly, you don't know what the long-term effects are going to be on your child's health. Yeah, so this is my plea to parents to please rethink whether they're going to be sending their children to school or not. Also to the education department, maybe they should start rethinking how they're doing schooling, you know, like I know with education now, the class disparities in this country has come to the fore in a really big way. Access to the internet. Many children go to school just to get a meal. So how do children learn when they are hungry, you know? And I think the socioeconomic disparities in South Africa has really come into the spotlight now with COVID-19. So, I mean, you know, there is no easy answer to this question. I'd say each parent must do what they feel is right for their child, but the state also needs to look at implementing structures which addresses things holistically and looks at the rights of poorer children in impoverished communities as well.
So are you going to be, so you're saying that you will not be sending your children to school?
No.
Okay.
I'm going to try and continue distance learning with my children.
Okay.
This is why I'm saying the socioeconomic disparities will come to the fore here, because those of us who have access.
Okay, I think we'll continue that conversation so that we can hear what the others are saying as well. Layali, I wonder if at this point you are able to come in around, you can hear the anxiety. So it might be the right time to talk about that, you know. I think COVID has put a lot of stress, anxiety, fear, worry. This is how people are feeling right now. Can you share something with us?
Yes. Actually, everyone on this planet is afraid of the unknown, because COVID-19 is very new. Nobody knows what is it exactly. Till now, every day we hear many of theories, of conspiracy theories, of science methods, science explanation, but we don't know. And human being always afraid from our ancestors, from the unknown. And we are facing for the first time now with the iPhones, the iPad, the 4G, and we hear about the 5G, and we are facing something very, very, we can't see, and it attacks everyone and it kills people every day. Our Facebook pages are full of people. When we open the Facebook, of died people, this announces his mother, his father, his relatives, and we are waiting, we are really afraid. So fear is very primitive, normal emotion. The humankind experience it since long time. But what can we do now? As you are talking about your children, my dear, I will tell you about my grandchildren. My grandchildren, one is 10 years old and the other one is 5, and they are taking their lessons through Zoom. So I asked my grandson, and he is very talented, very smart. So what do you think, Nadim? Do you want to go to school? He said, yes, I miss my friends. I miss the school. So this is our nature. We want to socialize, to be with people. So I can understand that, but the question is, what shall we do? What shall we do? This is the question. And the first thing I think is to accept that we are afraid, not to deny it, not to say, no, I don't care, I'm not, because if we deny it at morning, we can't sleep at night, because it is inside us. So we have to accept that there is something big. And not that only, we have many things come now, because the universe, I believe, is in a big shift. And there are many wars. Just listen to the news. Today, there are maybe 5 wars between 5 big countries. You can't believe that. So what's going on, for God's sake? And today in Egypt, something happened. I want to share it with you, my dear Candice, about forgiveness. Today, a young Egyptian girl, she is 20 years old. She suicide. She killed herself because she's a gay, and she sent. She immigrated when they. Last year, she held the gays flag in a party, a big party, and they arrested her. Then she went to immigrate to Canada, and in Canada, she's put a letter on her Facebook: forgive me, I can't bear this how people are so violent with her. I can't accept it. I love you, my friends. I love everyone. I love you, world, but I can't accept your violence. So she suicide. And this is not this only. When you see the Facebook, people, some people, many people are passionate with her, but other people say, let her die. We don't care. So the world now is full with violence, with hate. Look what is happening in the States also, everywhere. So it's not COVID-19, it's racist, it is many things we are facing. So we have to accept that, because this is life. Life is good and bad. We have to accept it, and to see what are we exactly afraid of, and think about it. What is the worst thing that could happen? And what I always say that we have, and at the end of this show, I will teach you how to breathe, because the first thing brain makes towards fear is sending signals to the whole cells that what we call in English, the opposite of relax, what to hold yourself.
Make you stressed?
Yeah, to the cells, yeah. So we have to breathe very good, to let oxygen come in all our cells, to let the stress, because now stress in every cell in our body. So I will stop now, because I talk a lot, and I will give another dose.
I was hoping, Layali, I was hoping that you would do that, because it's just to show us how to breathe.
Do you want me to do it now?
Because then
now?
yes, you could just tell us what to do.
Okay, as I told you, we are holding ourselves very tight, so we have first to relax. So the first thing we do, yeah, I want to tell you that I'm a meditator. I'm a transcendental meditator, yeah, meditation, and I learned a lot of this movement, and they give us the Tony Abunader, the head of it now. He gave us the first day this training to breathe. So first thing we do, because the lungs, and you know, COVID-19 is going to lungs directly. So the first thing we want to open our lungs. So we stretch our hands and we make like this, as if we are pulling, pushing the ceiling. Yes. So
yes,
exactly. So we push the ceiling, push it,
yes,
and keep a little bit, keep some seconds, and then relax. We'll do it again.
Okay, push,
and relax. You see, you feel from the first, and we'll make it for the third time. Push, and take a breath. And then when you take this energy inside out, as if you say ha, as if you want to take this emotion out. So we'll make it for the last time.
Yes.
We'll breathe, take a breath, then.
Candice,
This is
you have to dance for us, because that's what you do. Candice does dancing all the time. We've got to do that. She makes you happy.
Actually, I dance with my friend through Zoom every day. We dance at morning. So all of us.
We're getting ready, Justine, for Kim. So Kim, just before you speak, we're going to show a little video, which is from Black Lives Matter, that somebody's put together, but it was all the different places of the world where people were converging. So we'll have a look. Okay. So Kim, that was really to bring us into you, and as you know, many of us have been glued to all kinds of media, from television to social media, really understanding Black Lives Matter. Now I want to hand over to you as you introduce to us your work, the good work that you do. You tell us about the global sheroes, and please tell us about the situation in the US. Welcome, Kim.
I was born by the river in a little tent, and oh, just like that river, I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know change is gonna come. Oh, yes, it is. It's been too hard living, but I'm afraid to die. I don't know what's up there on the skies. It's been a a long time coming, but I know change is gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. So I go to my brother and my sister, yeah. And I say, brother, help me please. But it winds up knocking me back down on my knees. Oh, it's been a long time coming, but I know a change is gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. First of all, I just want to thank you, Lizzie,
Wait,
for
wait, that was
caring about.
wow,
Um,
wow. Mwah.
thank
Wow.
you. The thanks is to you because you care about Black lives. Black people care about Black lives every single day. But to see my South African sister, you know, you were born and raised of Indian descent, you were jailed for apartheid. You've been fighting for Pan-African platforms to help tell our stories in places where they don't care about Black lives. The fact that this is what you've committed your life to for almost 60 years, you know, I want to say thank you to you because Black people know Black lives matter. We don't have to protest in the street. We don't have to hold signs about it. You know, the sister said that she's afraid this summer to send her kids to school. Black women are afraid every single day before they even conceive. I don't have children. I'm scared to death. Every single day, Black people are afraid to send their children to school. They're talking about the coronavirus and the whole entire world is afraid. Black people live in fear. The other sister talked about breathing techniques, what it has taken for us to be able to adapt to living in enemy territory, especially in places like Baltimore where I live. Every single day you're practicing breathing techniques. When you walk outside your door, you're looking over your shoulder and it's chemical. She spoke about the anxiety that you feel. I mean, it's science says it. It's cortisol. You secrete hormones, and when you feel stress, you experience fight or flight. Your pupils dilate. Your hands get sweaty. You know everything about what it means to lose your life. You feel it when you feel like your life is on the line. Every time a police officer pulls you over, even if this is the day that you get to leave, you still feel that fight or flight and it affects your body physically. And so our children are under attack. And George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Eric Gardner, Sandra Bland, Mike Brown, Tamir was a child in Cleveland, Ohio. I saw that march. He was just a child. So not only are they killing adults, they're killing babies. And you know, I wish that this was something that was new. I wish that this was an epidemic or a pandemic that we were just recently experiencing, but this is 2020, and they said coronavirus is a pandemic, and in 1918 through 1919, they had the Spanish flu, and 500 million people died. And I think about that. And when I do my history, I realized that, wow, even then, when we were here in the US, we were experiencing these same attacks. I'm so sick and tired. We're exhausted from a heartache that doesn't seem to end. That's what Michelle Obama said. And when I think about her being the first lady, it meant absolutely nothing for Black people. Barack Obama being the president and being a Black man, that meant nothing for Black people. And so they keep telling us that we should look to policy reform and we should look to police defunding, and there's a change that's going to come. But the change is that we need to connect with like-minded value systems, with African-centered people that care about community and live their lives in that way. We need to, especially for Black people, we need to look at systemic upward mobility and all of the stress that we have felt for generations, birthing babies with excess cortisol in their systems because mothers are passing down this generational fear. We need to have art-centered programming that is incorporated into every facet of our lives to de-stress from this systemic racism. I don't care if you don't like the way I look. The system shouldn't be able to affect me because of that. And this is what we deal with in the diaspora. I mean, so if you want me to talk about Black lives in America, I mean, I'm not even qualified. There's so many people that should be on this platform to talk about issues like this and what should happen and how it should happen. But I do know that I'm a practitioner. I'm not an elder. I can't tell you what is appropriate, but I can tell you what is effective, because effectiveness comes from best practices. And because I'm a practitioner, I'm on the front lines, I'm in the field, I'm doing the work it takes to build communities, especially communities of Pan-African people, communities of people that are African-centered, that care about African values, communalism, these things, that people that care about that, barter and trade, ensuring that everybody has a right to food sovereignty, to upward mobility, to determine what their life should be. Those are African values, and I'm willing to align with anybody that's willing to work in the field to bring about that reality for the world, because only that is going to keep us from the next pandemic. Because I know for a fact that the coronavirus is only the tip of what is going to be the apex of the dismantling of what we call this false and superficial structure that we live in, if Black lives don't matter to people outside of Blacks, or should I say Africans, because that's where all people come from. That's where all life comes from. And Black people know that. And I think that, platforms like Ferdowsi's, that, the F show, I heard you talking about that when you first started. For me, F is facts. I could use the F for a whole lot of other things right now. Trust me, but, I hope the kids are watching. So I'm going to just say facts, hashtag facts, and I'm going to leave it at that.
Wow, thank you.
Yeah.
Very powerful.
Very powerful. So Kim, Layali, who was talking to us about fear, is living in Egypt, but she's Palestinian. So she understands struggle from a long, long time ago. And I think what is important as we have this conversation is to bring us together as women, as Africans, as people who are concerned with what is happening in our communities. And as you say, this is a pandemic, but that pandemic of racism is inherent and has been on for too long. I want Courtney, because you have a story about your mom, about your life, coming from the Caribbean, that transition, that slave trade, what that meant. Please share with us, Courtney.
Yeah, so my mom is originally from Barbados, but she was adopted by a white family in the UK because of, her mom just couldn't raise her. And so growing up in the UK, my mom just experienced just a ridiculous amount of racism. I mean, my mom's 50 now, so racism, say 40, 50 years ago was even worse sort of than it is now in the UK. My mom struggled for years and years with that, and I grew up witnessing that and witnessing her depression, her anxiety, her, real post-traumatic stress disorder, really. And that obviously then had an impact on me, and I think that sort of speaks to a lot to generational trauma, and how with the slave trade and with colonialism, you have people who underwent such horrific brutality, and they've never really there's never been an intervention to go, look, we need to heal from this on a mass scale. So, you know, we're just passing that trauma down through our generations. And because the issue of racism, the legacy of the slave trade has not been addressed. So we're just then accumulating more and more trauma and then passing it down. So yeah, I think we need this sort of global, you know, awakening to what's really going on here.
And then I'd like to talk to you, Candace, because you are talking about forgiveness, which I think at some point is probably the way that we need to go, because the trauma is there. How do you forgive somebody who has done such atrocious things? Where do you find that?
With Courtney on that, you know, we are living in a society where we living with trauma. I mean, trauma, I think, firstly, let me just backtrack, is something that most human beings never ask for, right? Regardless of what happens to us, when we're experiencing trauma, it's not because a result of what we have done. It is something that is completely out of our control. And so for me, forgiveness then becomes a tool of taking back control, taking back power. Because what happens is when we don't address our pain, when we don't address the wounding that we're walking through the world with, then we perpetuate that. We take it down to our kids take it down to their kids. And so to me, forgiveness is so important in the sense that you have to understand what it means first. And I think the reason I named my book Forgiveness Redefined is because I knew that growing up, I had so many skewed versions of what forgiveness was. And it was until I took the journey myself that I realized that, oh, I thought forgiveness was always for them. It was for that person. It was so that they feel better, or that, you know, I can forget the incident. But the truth is, forgiveness is about saying, you know, I am removing the emotional attachment I hold to this incident. And therefore, every time I think of it, or every time I think of that person, they are not in control of me. You know, I can still live my life. I can still be productive. I can still be a good person to me. And I think forgiveness is self-compassion. And I think especially in Black communities, right, or communities of color, actually any community that experienced some sort of oppression, whether it's, you know, because of who you choose to love, you know, and that sexual orientation or whatever it is for you, I find that it is so important to know your identity, to love yourself, to be good with you, and to realize that, you know what, all these people that are, you know, hurting me, they're the ones that need help. That's not my issue, but I need to heal myself. I need to forgive them so that I can be a good person to me, and that they don't control how I move through life anymore. And I think it is important for the world to go through healing. I don't think it's just Black people or women or trans people, or, you know, I think everyone, because I don't think you can genuinely kneel on someone's neck for like 9 minutes and be sane and be joyful and be happy and be living a life that is productive to society. That is not someone who is healed. That is someone with a lot of undealt with issues. And so I think when we can start healing, when we can start addressing our BS, to keep it PG, I think then we can have these conversations and they can actually start being productive. Because I think sometimes what ends up happening is we're having conversations with ourselves, and we don't need to convert the converted, right? Because then the world wouldn't be where it is. We need to get people to start having proper dialogues that changes the structures that we've grown up in and that we've seen. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
William, how do you feel about that? Because I think that, you know, on the pendulum, it's kind of from one end to the other. You have a personal concern about the well-being of your children right now. And I think in the broader context of what Kim has just shared with us, how do you feel?
Black Lives Matter. And I just want to do a little bit of marketing here. I have a film up on iol.co.za, and it goes off at midnight tonight. It's only up until midnight. It's part of the IOL Youth Day Film Festival. It's called Hip Hop Revolution, and it looks at the parallels of Black America and Black South Africa. And it looks at the hip hop as a voice of revolution in the 80s, and how Black consciousness movements in the States inspired the kind of thinking of young people during the apartheid state of emergency. And it also looks at the post-2000 context of what young Black South Africans are feeling post-democracy, you know. So I think it's an interesting film to look at in relation to Black Lives Matter globally at the moment. Yeah. And then I want to thank Leila for her breathing exercise. It definitely worked. Definitely made me feel a little bit more relaxed about things.
Yeah.
But I also just want to say to you, Leila, you know, our children's lungs are really going to hurt. They're going to wear face masks for 6 to 8 hours a day. They're not going to socialize as normal. They have to maintain 1.2 meter distance. I've seen that some schools are putting plastic around the children's desks and they're wearing face masks. So
I
for me,
think
I have to
we
look at both things.
Go ahead, Layali.
I'm optimistic that the science will find a solution for this, and I don't think that Corona will be with us years more. No, I think during months we will get rid of it. This is what I think. I really think so.
I believe that too, and I really hope so. And I hope that something good is going to come after the dismantling of this virus. I know that many Black people have lost their lives now in this time, but the world has also changed radically and rapidly.
Exactly.
You know?
I think this virus come for a role, to play a role in the universe life, in the earth life. That, hello, look inside yourself. Look what are you doing, and look to yourselves, and look around you. Look what you have, and what you do, and how you hurt others, and how you can affect positively the whole universe. This is what I think. So it is not just like a virus. No, it's a lesson for each one of us. This is what I think. So they will find. Don't worry. I'm very sure.
So we need to pause.
Trump, of course. I'm not Trump.
I think the issue around reflection about pausing, what lockdown means and how we take it and turn it around. You know, I was saying to, and Justine is around here, we've managed in this lockdown to do, for us anyway, in terms of our work, a lot more work. Because usually I'm on another flight in a different country talking to different people. Here I was totally locked down, which means we managed to do the Wazi animations. We've produced 10. We're working on another 10. We've done this F show, which I think is wonderful, because usually I would be, you know, I would have been already at the UN with you, Kim, with the Global Sheroes. I would have been at Prisiones, then in Athens for Fest of the Fests, and then I would have been in Edinburgh. So if I think about all of that, it's on a plane, off a plane, in an airport, somewhere else. Somehow this has just set us down to think, to breathe, to reconsider. But Kim, I want to give you the last word, because I think the pandemic is there, but it is a metaphor of pandemics. And as you so beautifully put it together, about the issue was about breathing. I can't breathe. That is what George Floyd said to those horrible mentors. I can't breathe. And Layali, you showing us how to breathe as we think about moving through this pandemic. And I think those metaphors are so important. And so, Kim, I want to thank you first for that beautiful song, My Soul Sister. That was lovely. But in the final words, what would you say?
I would first and foremost say that, again, I appreciate you for holding this conversation and caring about Black lives. You know, we are worried about the pandemic. But again, we've lived in a state of fear and pandemic after pandemic since the transatlantic human cargo trade and the 1400s, the 1500s. I mean, nobody has been talking about this. And Black people all over the world, we always run to the front lines to fight other people's fights. And, you know, for the first time, I feel like other people around the world are at least acknowledging the fact that they should be saying something. And I think that when we realize that, we have to ask ourselves, what is going to happen beyond the sign? Because like my sister from Palestine said, I'm so sorry, first of all, the oppression that you've been facing. You know, when one of our Black Lives Movement leaders, Tamika Mallory, after the Women's March in DC in 2017, when she began to, you know, protest about what's happening around the Palestinian, you know, oppression, they kicked her out. The women's movement kicked her right out. They said, you will not help those Palestinians. And at the end of the day, this is what always happens. And so Black unity matters, global African unity matters around African values. And ultimately, you know, I just hope those same people with the signs that are saying Black Lives Matters now are willing to do what Ferdozi did. She went to jail. You know, she was able to put action behind what she believed, because the movement of the corona eradication is going to leave. We won't have to ask our children to be in school or cover the windows or wear a mask. That's going to go away, just like the Spanish flu. But since the Spanish flu and before then, Black people will still be fighting for their lives. And until we realize that that's the real pandemic, that whether or not they go into another lab in Wuhan, China, or wherever and develop some more biological warfare, until we have African-centered world views globally, we will always suffer under tyranny of, you know, systems of belief that would oppress one people and do that at the expense of elevating another. And so I just really hope that we can maintain the momentum, that we can continue this conversation, because Black lives do matter. I'm an artist. I will continue to use my art to amplify that, especially on behalf of African women. Shout out to my sheroes doing this work on the front lines, wherever they are. You know, we're in 16 countries, and, you know, they're standing up to make sure that our communities are fed, to do the little that they can wherever they are. And that's what it takes. Everybody thinks that it needs to be this big, overwhelming forgiveness. And I want to forgive, but what about retribution? What about atonement? What are you going to do? What is your little bit? Because me saying that I'm no longer going to allow you to emotionally oppress me is one thing. You saying that as a result of that oppression, I'm going to do an actionable thing that now empowers you or that levels the playing field, that's something totally different. And the truth is that power only concedes to power. And if Black lives are going to matter, it's because we're going to make them matter. And so I'm dependent on you, whoever you are listening to this, please help me, Kim Poole, make Black lives matter, because that's the only way it's going to happen. I'm not going to say I forgive you and then you're going to automatically help me do that. It's going to take all of us. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to thank all of you for sharing this time with us and for teaching, learning, educating, and being so generous. And Justine, we can end with Mama Makeba's song, as she says to us, Soweto Blues.
Speaks of the events of June 16, 1976, when the children of South Africa decided to say no to apartheid. The song was written for us by Hugh Masekela. He calls it Soweto Blues. It's a no more Suit
Thank you, Justine. So we're just fading that out, and we've come to the end of the show, everybody.
We love you.
So
You
very much.
always, you are at the front.
Thank you, thank you, thank
Thanks for
you.
putting this together.
Love to everyone. It was
Love
great.
you all, so wonderful. Thank you. Mwah.
Okay, bye everyone.
Bye, bye.
Really nice.